Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Couple of Nukes. As always, I'm your host, Mr. Whiskey. And though he's been a hard person to schedule, I'm so excited for today's guest. He's actually probably the favorite host of any show I've been on. I've been on over 30 shows, and the conversation I had with him, I really enjoyed it, the way he hosted and what we talked about. And I'll put that link in the description below if y'all want to check it out. Talking about boundary setting as the loved one taking care of an addict, which is something I still do to this day. And it's getting more and more difficult sometimes, but we'll talk about that some other time. The reason I really like our guest today is I reference one of his social media clips all the time. He said, why did my rock bottom, why wasn't it the first DUI? Why wasn't it going to jail? Why did my rock bottom have to be so far down? And in an episode of my show, we talked about how addicts, their pain tolerance and their rock bottom, death is so different than ours. One guest I had said, you got to let them hit that rock bottom and then some because for them, it's not going to be enough. But, of course, prevention, intervention, recovery. Today we're going to talk about man up, sober up. Here with Ryan Penley, host of the Next Fix podcast, an author and a former addict. Mr. Penley, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. As you pointed out, man, I'm familiar with the rock bottom, and in my journey, I have found a rather unique perspective of it, and I think it's an advantageous one. And so this has become my mission is to share that frame, right? Because so much of our lives is how we frame it, and so um, even now, hearing your description, like I'm really excited to share some of these different perspectives on being an addict, and but my life has been something to write a book about, so that's what I did, right? But it wasn't to like ever boast. It was a conviction. It was a conviction inside of me. It was something that I feel like the Lord put inside of me is um, you know, there is no testimony without a test. So I had the test part. So I was like, okay, well, how do I organize the testimony? So, that was, both hard parts, right? Some could argue that the test is the hardest part. However, organizing your testimony and getting it out there, that's no cakewalk either. And so you know all about sharing the message, and that's what you do. And I'm so grateful that you do it. And so, yeah, man, that's who I am. I'm a guy out here trying to help people that are a few rungs down the ladder behind me. That's it.
When you talk about, the difficulty of preparing the testimony, that's something that, I was just asked about the other day, which was Mr. Whiskey, when you share about different parts of your story, does it ever get easier? Does it still hurt every time? And we talked about how the first time you ever share your story, especially very vulnerable parts of it, can be very difficult to muster up the, moral courage to speak about it, to relive some of those memories, right? As especially a lot of addicts want to. I know in the case of my father, like we mentioned, he hates AA, because he doesn't want to be negative. He feels like AA is negative because he's not able to have the mindset, if I went to AA, I heard those stories, okay, and that's exactly why we're here. But he sees it as he just gets depressed hearing the stories. My wife left me. My son doesn't talk to me. I got a DUI. He needs just that positive talk. And so for some people, it can be very, very difficult to, talk about what they've been through. But I like you mentioned the word conviction, and that's what your book title speaks to me, especially as a man, man up, sober up. That's a very convicting phrase. And so why did you choose man up, sober up? I mean, it's, you're like commanding, you're kind of really holding the person accountable. And I like it. Some people would say maybe it's too harsh of approach. I mean, what kind of went into that?
Well, I believe that so much of our lives is a call to adventure. And I think that this is something that's funneled down from the Lord or power greater than ourselves, however you want to look at it, the universe. We have this calling. And so many times that calling is a smack in the face. It's rarely easy because things worth doing typically aren't easy. And so man up. It can be interpreted as a call out. It can be interpreted as confrontational. It can be interpreted as aggressive. However, I see it as like, hey, you know, wake up. Here's your chance. And so it's short, it's to the point. People typically can interpret it as like, well, man up, like, okay, I got to snap out of it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways that you can interpret it, but the intention was the call to adventure. If you wanted to have like a more grand umbrella of the meaning, it would be the call to adventure. It's like, hey, it's time to man up. It's time to buckle down. It's time to bite down on the mouthpiece. It's time to hit those hard yards. It's trying to, let's push a little bit harder. You know what I mean? Because that's what man up is not, right? Man up is not like, hey, it's okay. No, I'm saying you're not okay.
Yeah.
But, it is okay to not be okay because you can acknowledge you can be better. That's what it's about. It's like, so man up and get better wherever you are at. And then take the humility in the small steps at the beginning. Now you've got the recipe for success. You know what I mean? That's what comes after it. But there is this initial challenge, this initial, man up. It's trying to move forward.
What I'll say is if I were an addict, I'd rather my wake up call be someone holding me accountable saying, man up, sober up, than my wake up call being, oh, now I'm in jail or now my wife left. Like you mentioned, would I rather hit rock bottom or rather be held accountable? And that's not to say most people try to hold them accountable and they don't listen, and we'll get into that. But I like that you kind of equivalate man up, sober up, saying they need each other. And I think that's true because in order to be the best man you can be, you need to be sober so you can perform all your duties as a husband, a father, a brother, a son, whatever it may be. So I really like you say, hey, man up, sober up. I do like that. So let's get into your journey. How, you mentioned and I mentioned hitting rock bottom and then some. So I want to go back to the very beginning. When did you start drinking? Like, what was the cause behind that?
Well, I mean, I say this often, and it seems like I'm taking it light, but it did start off that way. I mean, it literally was. I had some beers, like around a fire in Florida as a teenager, and I thought I was funny. Like, in my mind, I was like able to talk to girls, and I thought it was a massive success, right? So I thought in my head, like, and all I saw was upside, right? Now,
Yeah.
you can conjoin that with my family's perspective of alcohol is that there was no downside. Collectively, as a family, every one of us ignored all of the downside of alcohol and mostly cigarettes. My whole family had smoked, right? So it was they were, as a team ignoring all of the downside. So as a child in this environment, I it was not even on the horizon that there was anything bad that could ever come from this. All I felt was like super confident. And so um it was at first that was it, man. I just had a little bit of confidence, but then I got bit by the party bug, right? And so
Yep.
as I do with most things, I take things to, the pinnacle, take things to the mountaintop. So where did I go? I went to Las Vegas. I moved to Las Vegas when I was 22. I just turned 22. And up until that point, I was doing pretty well. I had bought my first house for my grandma at the age of 21. I was doing things that were pretty good. I had a good head on my shoulders. I was getting an education. I go to Vegas and I take the party scene to, the highest point of it. And if you're going to do that, that's where you go, right? That's what you do. And so I went to Las Vegas, and I was there for 11 years. And so anybody that's been or lived in Las Vegas, it has a finite time that you're there. Some people last a couple hours, some people last a decade, but you typically leave broke. And so
Yeah.
I did, I guess, what you could consider like but in that journey, I had been a part of the opioid epidemic, right? I mean, there's a doctor handed me enough pills to kill a rhinoceros. So while I was out there, these, uh, I say this, right? Opportunities. I had these forks in the road. Looking back, it was almost like a setup of the universe giving me what I was focused on, and it was on the
Mm,
high, right? I mean, it literally gave me what my attention was focused on. It put a doctor in front of me that would give me enough drugs to, I mean, I was an addict, boom, just like that. And they sent a nurse to my house to show me how to become an addict. It was, it was a peculiar time. A lot of people fell, it felt hard because of what our country was kind of doing, what the system was kind of doing as far as
yeah.
narcotics. But that was a big fork in the road for me, man. I mean, people closest to me. In fact, my best friend, he remembers the day that they sent a nurse to my house, right? And so I have 220 30 milligram roxycodones prescribed to me. I paid $5 to get all of these drugs. On the street, they're
Wow.
$40 a piece. I was getting 220 of them and I paid $5 total. And I was told this is your medicine. This is what you need. So I was telling other people, well, I need this. Meanwhile, I'm taking pharmaceutical grade heroin. And so not only that, but they sent a nurse to my house, and the nurse showed me how to crush up the pills. They gave me a device. They crushed the pills, right? And then I could put them into this tube, and I could inject them into my lower intestine. So it was the same thing as like mainlining heroin.
Wow.
Same notion. Like, and then, I mean, my best friend, he was watching me, and he said, I remember seeing your eyes, and you were gone. You just turned. Like, I went from like kind of functioning, kind of still around to off to the races. I mean, and that nurse was sitting right there the whole time too. Like she was
Mm.
there and he was there, and he said he saw it in my eyes. And then they now I have the green light. Now I have the tools I need to become an addict, and it was a hard, like I said, it was a turn for the worse.
Well, I want to go back to what brought you to the doctors in the first place.
Well, that was yeah, that was I was, and this is a good part about this time in my life is, and again, it's the call to adventure. I was doing some cool stuff, brother. I was living in Vegas. I had a good, I was making cash, and I was young and I was able, and so I was snowboarding and four wheeling and doing like pretty cool stuff, And so I got into a four wheeling accident out in Utah, Hurricane City, right just outside of Zion, if anybody knows Utah. But my buddy ran into me with a four wheeler and snapped my tibia and fibula.
Ooh,
Just snapped my bone. And
man.
so, I was back there holding my leg, and my leg was like this. And I
Yeah.
was looking at it, and I was like, I was just, it didn't hurt. That was crazy. Like, it didn't hurt. And we were so far out in the desert, it took them hours to come get me. And they couldn't get me out of the sand dunes. So I was just laying there. My friends were all there. And so yeah, they put some titanium in my body, and then, but now I had that passport, if you would, right? I had that passport to a prescription, which led me to my addiction. And so that's what
Mm.
that's what came next, right?
Yeah, I've had a lot of you're the first person to talk about injecting it into your lower intestine. I mean, that just blows my mind. I've never even heard of that from all the people I've had on my show who have used opioids and abused them. I mean, you're the first to say something to that level. I mean, that just shocks me. And how long were you in Vegas for?
11 years. Yeah. And they weren't all bad. They weren't all bad. And like that circumstance that I just expressed to you, that most would tell me, I was doing pretty good. I bought a house out there. My life was pretty decent, but I would say that most people would say, okay, yeah, he broke his leg, and then everything kind of started snowballing, man. And then I started taking on serious addict behaviors. Just things start snowballing out of control pretty quick.
Yeah, so let's get into that. So you start, using opioids for pain relief, and then, the addiction kind of forms. Was this doubled with alcohol on top of it or other drugs? How did it kind of start to play out?
Ironically, at the time, the reason why that tube was in my lower intestine is because I developed pancreatitis. And so that pancreatitis had developed into a tumor on my pancreas. And so I couldn't digest food. And so I had this tube that was going down to my lower intestine. And so now while I wasn't drinking at this point, right? The painkillers were taking center stage, right? And so
Yeah.
then I was going to work, and I started to steal at work. I was a bartender, so I wasn't drinking, right? So that was like my feather in my cap. Well, I'm not drinking, and I would tell people I'm
Mm.
sober. I would say that. I would say I'm sober. And looking back, I was far from that. But I just wasn't drinking alcohol. So here I am, the addiction started getting worse, and now the copious amounts of drugs that I was given to by the doctor, that wasn't enough, right? And so I was started stealing at work, in order to perpetuate the addiction. That got out of control, so then they fired me, right? So once they fired me, now I couldn't get the drugs through my health care. So then it started getting real nasty because I didn't have enough money to keep that kind of a thing going.
Mm.
And I lost my job, and I was losing my house. I was losing my relationships pretty quickly. And I did what every good addict always says. Well, I'll just change the location. That's what's wrong. Everybody around me, that's the problem. And so I'll just change my geographical location. That's going to solve things. So I moved to Colorado. And one thing I learned about that is that I'm exceptionally good at finding drugs no matter where I go. like,
Yeah.
like, I call it alleyway commerce. Like
Should have been a cop.
you could, well, no, because I do the drugs, right? So you just want me to not, no, you don't want me to be on the hunt, like I try to just stay on hunt other things, I guess. But yeah, I was, like I said, alleyway commerce was something that I could find myself into. So, but I went
Mm.
to a town of 6,000 people up in Estes Park, Colorado, 6,000 people. And I thought, well, there's no drugs there. No, there's pretty much drugs everywhere if you look hard enough. And so I didn't have the painkillers any longer, and I turned my back on everything that I did have going for me in Vegas. Went to Colorado, but I brought myself along with me in a very unhealed version, right? So I was still not doing any work to get better inside at all. Just thought the location was it, right? So I go to Colorado, and then the wheels start to fall off even further. But now my body gives in, right? So biologically, I say that despite being on a feeding tube and all these other things, but I started developing diabetes. And so I'm in Colorado, and I had a couple of visits to the hospital, and they're like, you got diabetes. And I was like, no, I don't. And they were like, yeah, you got diabetes. And I just ignored them, and it got worse. And my body really started failing. Um, and people didn't know what to do. So some people that do care, they're like, all right, we know he's wanted in Las Vegas. Let's send him to jail, and he'll dry out. So that it's a decent plan. So
Right.
they call the cops take me to jail. Um, they don't really keep you too long if you're not like a serious problem. So they let me out. But here I have diabetes. I'm not doing anything about that. I've got an addiction problem. I'm not doing anything about that. I get out of jail, um, and I have this craving for sugar. Craving, man, like deep in my body. I'm like, oh my God, like what's wrong with me? I've got like maybe $4 to my name. And I get this Mountain Dew, and I chug it like 84 ounces, no ice, just straight sugar. It pops my blood sugar, spikes my blood sugar. I go into a coma. And well, I don't really know how it developed. I just know that I go comatose, and my body temperature goes to 85 degrees, and I'm out. Like I don't know, I'm out, completely out. My friend, who he's a partier. He may have been high at the time. I don't know. He doesn't know what to do, and it's not his fault, right? But I'm dying. I'm on his couch, and I'm dying. I'm defecating myself. I threw up on myself. I'm completely out of it. My body temperature is dropping. I'm dying. I am exiting the world. So eventually he calls an ambulance. They get there. They helicopter me out to another town. Um, and they started a triage. My condition, my blood sugar was at 1100, which
Wow.
is, they said, is the highest they've ever seen. And they
The
said that
highest I've
is
ever heard. Yeah.
Yeah, and I but here's how ignorant I was, brother. I didn't when they told me when I come out of that coma and they're explaining to me what's going on. I'm looking at them clueless, right? Clueless. Why? Because I'd never treated my diabetes. I was ignoring the fact that I was an addict. I was so they're telling me, they're asking me like, "Well, where was your insulin? What happened? Did you get stuck somewhere without your insulin? Were you not able to get your med?" And I'm looking at them like, what are you talking about? And they're like, your blood sugar, how on earth could how did it get so high? And I'm like, I couldn't tell you. I've never taken insulin in my life. I've never done anything about my blood sugar ever before. And they were looking at me like, oh, this is wild. Like, you shouldn't be alive. And I had a port in my chest. I was completely out of it, but I did wake up to a lot of people that cared about me. That was a wild experience. And so, yeah, that was and I go into that in the book. That's where I start the book off is from that coma.
Mm.
Yeah, it was intense, man. But that still wasn't the rock bottom, even though
Yeah.
everybody claims it to be, right? Because you know, yeah, it's crazy, man.
No, I get that. The reason I brought up the lower intestine injection, for those who don't know, people will purposely do drugs or alcohol through their intestines to get the effects faster because of the absorption to the bloodstream. So don't ever do this. I do not recommend this at all. But I've heard of people soaking tampons into alcohol and then plugging it up their rear. And it's very dangerous. But yeah, so I find it so you kind of had like the full combination of worst possible things where it's also going straight into your intestines on top of, it already being bad for you. And I think it's just insane to hear your story. I need to clarify, was your diabetes developed as a result of the addiction?
Yeah, yeah. Through copious amounts of alcohol and the pills, and I'll never truly know. I'll never truly
Yeah.
know exactly what it was, but my pancreas is broken. And so, I mean, even to this day, doctors are a little perplexed because I carry traits of diabetes 1 and 2. And so, they'll say things. It's wild, brother, how little people actually know about diabetes, including myself. I don't, I really don't know shit. I've got to be honest. Like I know what I need to do to kind of mitigate it. I know what I should stay away from here and there.
Yeah.
But as a disease overall, man, I mean, they basically say the same thing every time: exercise, eat less sugar. But I know if I eat very little amount of sugar and I have an active day, that could be just as dangerous. That could be
Yeah.
just as dangerous. And so here I am. I've got this pancreas. It just doesn't work well, right? And so yeah, it's become something I have to navigate.
And I want to go back to what's actually, something very relevant is you said, I said I was sober because I wasn't on alcohol. And my dad, some of the guys I've had on the show, same kind of mentality where my dad, as long as he's not drinking vodka, the holy grail of his addiction, he's sober. As if he's just like, and his biggest justification is he's really gotten into White Claws, not a sponsor, drinking those every day to meet his alcohol cravings, but still be able to behave. And it's like, you're not dry and you're not sober, but it regulates his addiction in a way where he's able to function at least. Obviously, I don't encourage it and I want him off alcohol fully, but his justification is, yeah, of course I'm sober. I'm not on vodka. And then I had Andrew Michael Holton was on my show, and he kind of, when he was an addict in Korea, he was saying, "Oh, it's just soju or it's just sake. It's not, X, Y, Z." So we talked a lot about the justification game. I think I've even mentioned it on your show with my dad being, "Well, son, it's your birthday today. Of course I have to drink." Or it's 4th of July. Oh, it's St. Patrick's Day. And him being half Irish to St. Patrick's Day one. Ironically enough, that's the one day he like doesn't drink. He's never been like crazy about it, but yeah, it's that that justification of, oh, I'm not drinking, therefore And that's because so many people have associated sobriety with alcohol use, and people forget that, drugs are an addiction as well. It's the same term sober used for it. And people often, Dr. Brian LeQuanon, when he came on my show, one of my favorite episodes, he spoke about the difference between being dry and sober. He said people can be dry, not sober. And I said, well, what did he mean? He goes, dry is when you're not doing drugs or alcohol. Sober is when you're not doing drugs and alcohol and you're trying to improve your life spiritually, relationships, self-improvement. Sobriety is that next step. That's why your book
Well,
is Man Up, Sober Up, not Man Up, Dry Up.
well, yeah. And so now let me share a development that I've been working on, and
Okay.
it has another layer to it, like what you're talking about, like the perspective or the narrative that we tell ourselves about,
Yeah.
okay, well, at least I'm not drinking vodka, so I'm much better than I was. And then they, like as your father attaches a label to it, I'm dry, or I'm sober because I'm not doing this particular thing that ruins my life exponentially. So I spent a lot of time combating addiction, right? And so my recent development, right, and what I've really focused on, and some people shoot this down and they say this is not the way to be.
Mm.
However, being an addict and trying to combat my addictive traits, my addictive characteristics was a freaking nightmare. That's not me. Moderation ain't me, brother. It ain't it. I can't do anything like that. Right. So instead of spending this energy just fighting upstream, I thought to myself, well, could I just be all right with being an addict and then get addicted to things that matter? Get addicted to things that are valuable. Pour my energy and tenacity into something that helps other people. And
Mm.
because and this is how I kind of try to tie this in together, right? Like I try to tie it because you know people look down on it as a negative, but we choose our own perspective. Just like the rock bottom thing, as you're mentioning, like people visit this rock bottom, and some people's rock bottom is much lower than another person's. But if you look at it well, sometimes if you want to shoot an arrow far, you've got to pull that string back a little bit further, and that's what I see. People that have a
Mm.
really low rock bottom, they've just seen that bow get pulled back so far, it blows your mind. And so then they're just going to launch that much further once they kind of figure out their own journey. But back to the thing about addiction, instead of combating who I was, who I am inherently inside of my body, let's pour it into something effective. And I think that this is what addicts make the world go round. You see what I'm saying? Like
Mm.
Mother Teresa undoubtedly was an addict for peace and caring for people. She put herself at harm's way. Gandhi was an advocate for being, a political advocate and all of these things. He put himself in harm's way. He had foregone his own personal, natural desires at the very least, if not of his natural needs. He had foregone a lot of things, and that's
Yeah.
what addicts do. Addicts forego what is going on around them. They forego their relationships and their own personal care to pursue something that's unhealthy, right? That's where it becomes unhealthy. But make no mistake about it, these people that turn the world and make the world a different place, Steve Jobs was addicted to innovation. He was, many people say
Mm.
like, he was horrible to work with sometimes because he was so tenacious of his pursuit that he would kind of step on people in the process. And so some
Yeah.
people got hurt by that. And that's addictive nature. It is addictive nature. But look what came as a result of it. And these are extreme cases, but this is really, really what gets me fired up is that like I don't try to douse the flame of the addict inside. I just try to aim it at the right target. That's all.
Well, I hear you 100% rather than trying to get rid of the addictive nature, utilizing it in a different way. Because I had an episode with Nathan Buttigieg, great guy, very impressive guy, was doing a bunch of coke and alcohol, cold quit one day. And now people would say he's addicted to the gym. He wakes up at like 3 a.m., goes for like 4 or 5 hours every day. And that's what he does for sobriety. We talked about fitness as a replacement tool for addiction. And I have other episodes where it's the same thing where people got really into artwork. They're painting every day for hours or writing or working. People say I'm a workaholic, and that's where, because I've had a lot of addicts in my family, smoking, drinking, all that. They say, Mr. Whiskey, you're the exception. You just happen to be a workaholic. And but yeah, I took a quiz courtesy of Alex Sanfilippo on a Podmatch, the pod quiz, and my score for self-care was all the way in the red. They said, you're such a workaholic, you don't sleep, you don't eat, you're always in a different state trying to do stuff for your company to reach people. I've been confronted about this multiple times. I was stopped in the military. Guy came up to me, a chief, great guy, super nice guy. He said, Petty Officer Whiskey, even Superman couldn't save everyone. You got to take care of yourself, man. But I'm always out here, and I said I'm Batman, but I'm always out here running around, trying to help everyone. And people say that's how I implemented my father's addictive nature in me into work. But I agree. I think that it's interesting too because my father, it his whole personality is addictive because you look outside of his drinking habits. There was a game called Pokemon Go that came out, and about 2 years after its launch, I started playing it, and I got my dad to play it, and that just fed into his addictive and hoarding nature. I mean, he would play still not as much, but he would play 8 hours a day to the point that he would scream at my younger sister if she cost us a gym battle, or if I got in the way of him catching a creature, he would get violent. Like he became so addicted to Pokemon Go, and he would just play for hours every day. He would run outside in his underwear at midnight to go catch a rare creature that, was outside down the street. Like he got into, and plenty of people did, but he got into it. And then before that, there was this game, Slither.io, where you eat these dots on a screen and you grow as a snake and then you can fight other snakes. And man, that idea of hoarding up all these dots and points and becoming number one on the leaderboard. I mean, he would play for hours every day, blasting techno music. Like he is just addictive in nature. And I wish he was addicted to being a good father, like I said,
Right,
right?
right.
Because it's just everything he does, like you said, he goes all the way. He full sends it. He has to take it all the way to the next level, most of the time ruining it for other people. And in fact, we won't get into it now, but you look at a lot of young men are addicted to video games. And we
Mhm.
can say that even they're made to be addictive, yes, but they're also taking advantage of people's addictive natures. So to get back on track,
All
are
right.
you saying you're now a workaholic? Like you've put everything into writing, into helping people, fight addiction, into my rock bottom recovery. Is that kind of what you've done?
Well, I would say the overall aim is up, meaning, well, just to kind of digress a little bit, a very big part of my journey is physical fitness, right? And I wouldn't say that it ever truly got like to the unhealthy scale, but it was the focus. And I also I understand why somebody I think it's an incredibly wise move because as I was saying, is I could see why somebody would choose exercise as a replacement because there's an incredibly low hanging fruit in exercise, and it's the dopaminergic release that you get from exercise, almost instantaneous, right? Like when you get a pump, like from lifting weights, it's rather instant as far as that particular return is concerned. That feeling, of course, building muscle and that type of thing takes some time. Losing weight takes a little bit more time, but there can be, from a good workout, a very strong sense of release, a very strong sense of accomplishment. And you can get that from just a pretty quick sweat. You can get a sweat on it and really achieve that. And so I always, man, if somebody's struggling, I'm like, hey, before you hit that fridge and maybe you're addicted to sugar, and before you hit that cake or, whatever it may be, like just do 10 squats. And I'll ask you, like, can you do 10 body weight squats? Are you able to do that? Or if you're not able to do that, can you just get up and down off the couch 10 times? And can you promise me that you can do that before you actually make it over to the fridge to get maybe a beer or whatever? And so just the intervention of that movement typically will get that little spark, that little bit of a dopaminergic release to kind of interfere with that habit, the habitual dopaminergic chase, right? And so if
Mm.
you can kind of interfere with it a little bit with something that is healthy, and exercise typically is, all right, 5 to 6 hours of it, starts to become unhealthy. But yeah, my own personal journey as far as physical fitness went, it was pretty much, it was all positive, right? I went from like 265 pounds down to 200. I went from
Mm.
like, I don't know, 34%, 36% body fat down to like 12. And then I became a personal trainer. And so I was, I just took that transformation and I just, copy and pasted that into the marketing and started training people. And so that helped, right? But nobody really looked at me as like, oh man, that guy's, he's a maniac. And so the question was, what do I do? I pour that addictive nature into these days. And I would say it's my professional pursuit. Um, However, I haven't distilled that professional pursuit into like a single skill or a single,
Mm.
like I haven't like poured it all into being an author, despite having written a book, right? I haven't poured it all into being a podcast host, despite being a host of a podcast. I have kind of just collectively aimed a little higher and kept that trajectory up. And as a result of that, right? And again, collectively just aiming slightly up, and there's some real truth to this, right? I haven't focused like a laser on one particular thing, but just keeping that aim positive day in and day out, whatever the particular pursuit may be, right? Like I've managed to just really take off professionally, which is something that I was speaking about before we hit record. I mean, 4 years ago, I was wanted in 3 states. I couldn't get a job at Dunkin' Donuts. I couldn't get a job at Walmart. They shut me down. Went to the grocery store. They're going to bring me on as manager. They did a background check. They shut me down. And like I had mentioned, like who would hire me, right? And then as of yesterday, I turned down an offer for like a couple $100,000 a year. And I thought to myself, like, this seems illogical, but no, it's just the progression that I've made by aiming up every day and staying in that pursuit along the way. And it started to just grow exponentially. And then the results are actually here. I mean, it's a magnificent transformation. But now, as I'm kind of expressing myself, each individual project, like my book, like I wrote and published that book in 3 months, right? Because I was addicted. So I guess to kind of retract my previous statement, I did use that addictive nature by like every morning, no alarm clock, no alarm clock. I just boom, I'd wake up 3:30 a.m. Fire inside of me, writing,
Yeah.
writing, rereading, writing, proofreading, send it to the editor. I mean, it was like that part. I guess it was a bit addictive there. So I said that I hadn't poured myself into it, but yeah, I did really go hard there for a short period of time with that pursuit there, right? So
Yeah. And we kind of got non-linear with the story. We went over the most important part. When and why did you man up and sober up?
well, I mean, that's such a tricky question, brother, because and this is just me being transparent. I had given up, man. I had thrown in the towel, and I was like in a very lazy way committing suicide, every time. And I've actually talked to a lot of people in recovery that feel similar to what I'm
Yeah.
about to express, is that I just didn't care if I woke up or not. I wouldn't drink a whole bottle of vodka with the intention of dying, but I'd think to myself, well, if I die, then I die. And
Yeah.
I did that started becoming the norm. Like if I drink this bottle, it may be the last one. That's okay. And that's that almost. I mean, and in
But
some
why?
ways, yeah. In some ways, it's maybe even worse than you know having the intention and like getting the rope out and going down that path. And this is something that I'm familiar with, by the way. My stepfather, he hung himself. He was addicted to heroin, and things started getting out of control on him. He's the father of my sister and my stepfather. and she found him in the yard. Just he had hung himself from a tree there with a wire, and so he went the other way. He was dead quiet about it, and then he had the intention. I'm gonna end it. And so yeah, but to answer your question, what you're saying is that, well, what turned that around? Well, after after not caring for so long and looking to the left and right and just knowing how freaking awful it felt, and I wasn't going anywhere. I didn't care if I died, but God kept me around many, many times over again. And eventually I got sick of it. I just got sick of it. I got sick of getting let out of the mental hospital. I got sick of just thinking like that, being trapped. And so then I started figuring out ways to get some traction. And so um, eventually I used the time in a Baker Act in Florida where it's a 72-hour hold on you. So it gives you this little window of drying out a little bit, just enough to maybe put a plan together. And so then I started doing that. But it damn sure wasn't a switch. It was not that pivotal. It was a more of a gradual, you know, like just sickening of where I was. And then, you know, making the decision, right? The decision came well before the traction. The decision of like, man, this sucks. Like, what can I do? And then, the traction didn't come until much further along down the road. And so it's a tricky place to be, brother. But it wasn't instantaneous.
Yeah, and I just hate that aspect because some people don't get sick of it, or it takes so long for them to get sick of it, and sometimes it's too late. And so it's just rough. And then you mentioned, and I mentioned a couple of times, the podcast. So I'd love for you to share about that and the recovery work you're doing with that.
Yeah, I'm helping people on an individual level. I am helping some people. Uh, you know, just because of the nature of my family and things like that, I don't take too much on my plate. But I'm helping people on an individual level, also with the show. There have been a lot of people that have shared, moments of identifying with the message. But it is called the Next Fix. It is focused on the better end of recovery, and I use it as a platform, for people that have, stacked up some sobriety days and they're putting their own projects together and that type of thing. I have them come on the show and then express like what that has looked like. How did that call to adventure happen? How did they get to, either writing a book or helping out their families or whatever it may be. It's been an excellent platform. It's been an awesome experience. And then that's also conjoined with the Facebook page, my Rock Bottom Recovery. Man, I got 240,000, 239,000 followers, 239.5. It's just, but like, man, just seeing people interact with whether it might just be a phrase or it might be a clip from some people in recovery or people expressing how they've been in it. It's for a lot of people, it helps them. It gives them a layer of hope, because too many times we put ourselves up against others and in a very unfair perspective. We like look at them and we think about how far we have to go instead of thinking it can be done. And so that's a tricky place, man. And so I'd like to think that I position the brand in providing some hope. And not just hope, but maybe, some steps and some resources to make a move in the right direction.
Yeah, and what do you see future-wise as far as books, as far as the show, as far as the group, just continual expansion? Do you have any projects that you're working on right now?
Not necessarily, right? Because I got a 16-month-old son. He takes up pretty much all of my attention these days.
Yeah.
But at some point, he'll have his own adventure to be called to, school, things like that. But I think that the next book is going to be on the horizon in the not too far future. And so I've been kicking around, you know, titles. Man Up, Level Up might be one of them. And it's just, again, I believe wholeheartedly in just reaching down the ladder to somebody that's a few rungs down below, right? And there always is somebody. We need to pay attention to who's above us, learn, and then look behind us down on that ladder and help. And so, that would be the next pursuit is most likely that one.
Okay, and then as we end things here, I want two messages from you. The first one, what would be your message to everyone listening who is dealing with an addicted loved one right now, whether it's a brother, a son, a husband, a wife, a daughter, they're dealing with an addicted loved one. What would be your message to them?
Yeah, the message is a hell of a lot easier than pulling it off, my friend. And actually, we spoke about this. It's like you have to mitigate that distance with boundaries. And so don't give up on them, but don't just do everything they want, right? And that's the delicate walk, right?
Yeah.
But so yeah, how about this boots to ground move to make here, right? Set an alarm and call them every damn Thursday or every day at a particular time or once a month, whatever that looks like. Set an alarm and do it. So where they know, okay, it's Thursday, my son's going to call me, it's noon, and then you do it. And when you start doing that, and maybe it's stopping by and bringing over a sandwich, whatever it is, but create the boundary, then do it over and over again. And when they see that you're always there, like clockwork, you haven't given up on them. However, you don't pick up every time they call to give them $20. You see what I'm saying? There's a difference, right? You set the support on your schedule, not
Mm,
whenever they're just calling you and being an addict and looking for $20 to get high again. You can't let that happen. So boots to ground move, set an alarm, call on that day and time. Just boom, like clockwork. I think that's a very helpful move right there for
yeah.
certain. But and
No,
you said a nugget, right? You want me to
well,
leave
the
that?
second message then what would you say to the addict listening right now? Maybe they just found out they're addict. Maybe they listen to the conversation. They're like, you know what? Maybe my habits are addictive, or maybe they happen to listen to this because they're trying to get better. What would you say to them, to the addict, especially after all you've been through?
Right. Yeah. It's a damn good question, brother. And I would say perpetual incremental progress is unstoppable. But what does that mean? Perpetual means it has to be repetitious. It has to be every day, but it doesn't have to be big every day. As I was kind of mentioning, I just aim up and then keep the aim above the horizon. That's it. And so perpetual means you don't stop. Incremental means, or it's implied, incremental is small, right? It doesn't have to be big leaps and bounds. You don't have to reach some massive milestone, but you do just have to focus on getting better every day. Incremental, right? Small progress, right? And so that just anything that gets you a little bit better. It might be a decision with your diet. It might be a decision of you just not having a drink every hour. Maybe it's maybe it's a little more, maybe it's 2 hours. Whatever it looks like for you, right? Figure out what that is to be a little bit better that particular day, then do that, right? So yeah, perpetual incremental progress is unstoppable. If you get that formula right, it will not fail. You will not fail. You will be exponentially better than where you are now in just maybe 6 months. Hell, maybe even 3 months. But if you keep that up for a year, 2, 3 years, it's going to blow your mind of where you're going to end up. It really will.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice, and hope everyone listening, whether you're the addicted one or on the side of handling someone who is dealing with an addiction, this has been helpful. Again, Man Up, Sober Up in the description below, my rock bottom recovery, the next fix, a ton of resources, for getting sober, staying sober, and for helping your loved one who is addicted or helping yourself. And Mr. Penley, thank you for all that you do, for sharing your story, and then for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate the time, brother. Thank you. See you.
Sailing through the ocean blue, nuclear reactors my crew, guiding the ship, the stars as our guide, through the waves we ride, jokes and laughter fill the air. On this voyage we have to share, working together, side by side, as one family we will abide. In the heart of the ship we reside. Nuclear operators with pride, powering the vessel with every stride. Our mission, the source of great pride.